Hey everyone, and welcome to the very second ever episode of the Piecast by Tom's Hardware. I'm Tom's Hardware editor-in-chief, Abram Pilch. With me today, as always, I have my co-hosts, associate editor Les Pounder, and Pi expert extraordinaire Ash Puckett. And today we have a very special guest, Caroline Dunn, who runs her own YouTube channel. She is an extraordinary. She's been featured in the June issue of Magpie, the official Raspberry Pi magazine. She does a variety. She is an expert at Raspberry Pi and all things IoT, and she's going to demonstrate one of her coolest projects. But before we get started with that, just wanted to ask Caroline. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. How did you get into doing projects with Raspberry Pi?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's my honor. And let's see, I started in 2016 with Raspberry Pi. I saw this project called How to Make an Alexa from a Raspberry Pi. And I bought a Raspberry Pi just for the sole purpose of making an Amazon Echo.
Wow. So you're really into doing voice assistant stuff. I know on your channel, which folks can find on YouTube by searching for Caroline Dunn. Is that the best way to find it?
If you type in youtube.com/Caroline, just my first name, that's you can also find me that way. That's the easiest way to find me.
Cool. Yeah. So one of the coolest things I see that you do on your channel is you do live broadcasts, and you actually have people challenge you to program Alexa skills in real time. What got you into Alexa, and do you like Alexa a lot better than Google Assistant?
That's a great question. So it kind of started out, when Alexa came out, it was kind of like, what is this? What are this? And they put in a lot. Amazon put in a lot of resources in giving us a lot of sample code, a lot of incentives to get started coding Alexa skills. So we kind of started just because of that aspect of it. There was just a lot of support for that. So we were just playing around with it for a while. And then I think last year, Amazon had this big contest, money was involved, everything. And I entered the contest. It was an international contest. And I came in, I was in the top 10, and I was the only female in the top 10. And I was the only one from Atlanta, in the Southeast, in the top 10.
Wow, that is awesome. So one of the coolest projects that you've been working on, something that I really would like to have for my 8-year-old son, and frankly for myself too, probably, is a hand washing timer that will actually help you know that you've washed your hands for at least 20 seconds. Can you talk to everybody about how you made that?
Alrighty, so here, hopefully you guys can see this. This is my Raspberry Pi 4 I am using, and this is a speaker, and it's connected through the 3.5 millimeter jack here, and then there's an LED that lights up, and basically it plays a song. 20 seconds. It goes for 20 seconds. The light lights up for 20 seconds. It plays a song for 20 seconds. And when the song is done, you're done washing your hands. I think I could go on a lot more about that. But
how do you activate it?
Components, and this is how it works.
So Caroline, how would you activate? How have you programmed it to activate? Does someone have to hit a button, or is it motion detection or sound?
Okay, there is a motion sensor right here, and it is a bit sensitive. So y'all want a live demo here? See if this works.
Yes.
There you go. That was the last 2 seconds of it right there. So I had it in my bathroom for a while there, and I kind of had it back in the corner, and I had the motion sensor kind of next to the soap dispenser. So every time I kind of wave my hand over the soap dispenser, I have one of those, those foamy soap dispensers. Every time I press the soap dispenser, it would start playing that song, and I would try to wash my hands for 20 seconds. Now, can I make a little note about 20 seconds is a lot longer than I thought it would be. I thought I would be awesome at this 20 seconds hand washing thing. But the first time I did it, I think I was done in like 3 seconds washing my hands. And I was like, wow, 20 seconds. And I'm just.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is something that is definitely a challenge, and one of the things is Caroline's actually going to write this up as an article for us with maybe some actual changes to the design. I think we're actually curious if anyone in the audience has any questions or wants to weigh in on what things you'd want to put into a hand washing timer design. One thing I think would be cool is to have a screen of some sort, whether it's done as an LED matrix or perhaps Caroline's holding up, for those of you listening, a what do you call that? It is
it's some sort of Pi screen module, LED screen module.
It's just an LED. It's an LED screen monochrome that can do countdown. I think you can get those with an I2C interface for like $8 usually, and that's one way of counting it down. I think it would be cool. Amir from the chat suggests maybe better to use a 7-segment LCD. Yeah, I have a couple of those, and I think you could definitely do that. I would kind of like to see it be. I mean, like that's the cheap and easy way, but if you want it to entertain you, maybe doing something that plays an animation while you go would be a way to go. Like if one got a use like a Raspberry Pi Sense hat or something like that, where you have the LED matrix on it and had to do something cool while you're counting, or did something with with like just a graphic on a regular LCD screen. But it obviously there's like the minimum easy way, and then there's the like cooler looking but more expensive and power consuming way. Amir also asks, and this is a very good question, because Caroline and I were actually discussing this before the show. What about powering it? How do you power it?
Well, thank you for asking. So they now, for the Raspberry Pi 4, it's a USB-C power, and I have had good luck with these power banks that are USB-C, and you plug in the USB-C, and you can power your Pi with one of these USB-C charger. I actually have a different story about that. I'm doing a different project out of my patio right now, and I had this idea to buy a solar charging power bank and put it out on my patio, and that way it would continuously power my Pi all day long on my patio out there. I think the one I bought was defective, and it didn't work, unfortunately. But it would be cool if we had something outside and it just powered itself, and I didn't have to continuously recharge my power bank every day. But doing a power bank is something that's totally really good with the Raspberry Pi 4 with the USB-C. I had a lot of problems doing a power bank with the Raspberry Pi 3, and I always got that lightning bolt problem on there. But Raspberry Pi 4 USB-C is the way to go.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because you have to figure out like what the power consumption is if you're going to be doing it for a while and leaving it there all the time, particularly if you have an LCD screen. If as someone suggested, that you use an LCD screen, I mean, presumably the screen goes to sleep when you're not using it, so that would save some juice. But probably if it's in your bathroom or your kitchen, you might be able to just plug it in and leave it plugged in all the time. For an different outdoor project, it would be really cool to get something that does solar. Then you could sort of do what I forget the name of it. I think it's called Africa Forever. There was some person who did a project somewhere in, I think, I'm trying to remember which desert, but in Africa, where they created a solar powered what they call art installation that just plays the Toto song Africa on repeat forever.
Awesome.
I do not know if that's Raspberry Pi powered, but it could be. Like you could make that. I think it's in the middle of the desert somewhere, so someone would have to actually find it, and see if it's still working. But theoretically, you could. That's the kind of thing that you could do. Also, I'm sure people want to do outdoor security cameras, things like that. There's a lot of cool things for outdoor, which is just just really just shows how much you can do with the platform, which is amazing. Speaking of things that you can do with the platform, this week, Les, you were able to get Windows 10 running on a Raspberry Pi 4. Can you explain how you did it?
I can, yes. It was quite an interesting project, this. We consider Windows 10 to be something of an x86 powerhouse, and to run it on something as simple as a humble Raspberry Pi was fantastic. So the project was from Amir Dahan, who's in the chat right now. And it was interesting to see how the community has got together to fill a void that Microsoft hasn't been able to provide. There has been other versions of Windows 10 for Raspberry Pi. There was IoT Core a few years ago, but that was more of like an appliance project where you could build applications in Visual Studio Code and then push them to this Raspberry Pi as an appliance. But now we've got a full desktop. So you can download this application, which will write the image of Windows on ARM to an SD card or an SSD. The latest version works with SSD. And you can.
Did you get that working, by the way?
It is in progress. That one, I will say. There is another build coming out very soon, which is going to address a few issues, which I was talking to Amir about earlier on today, in fact. But this application, it looks professional. It just guides you through the process. There isn't too much to worry about. There's a few things that will crop up that you may be not too comfortable with, such as UEFI BIOS, downloading drivers from different sources. That might seem a little alien to just a standard Windows install, but once all that is written to the SD card and a hack is put in place to make the USB hubs work, you're away. It just works. And it is comparable, I will say, to an Intel Celeron machine speed. So it's not a speed demon. You're not going to be sat there using Photoshop and surfing the web with multiple pages open, but it's good to do just simple tasks. So I did a test with the Arduino IDE because I do quite a lot of work with Arduinos. Hence, I've got my little Arduino board here. And I managed to get it installed using a standard Windows installer. Got it running. I managed to flash the board straight away and have some flashy lights on the Arduino, which was fantastic. I then tested with the GNU image manipulation program, GIMP as it's called, and that worked flawlessly. It wasn't as quick as what it is on my normal machine, but it was perfectly serviceable. And it shows that the Raspberry Pi, especially the Raspberry Pi 4, can be used as a Windows device very easily. And it would be great if Microsoft could make it official and do something with it. Because right now, as I say, this is a community project. It's made by community members in a Discord chat, and they're doing fantastic work as a community. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to point out, at this point, I think it's more of a do it because you can proof of concept, would you say, than you would want to run this every day?
Yeah, it's pretty much like just you want to install it to test out what it can do. Just like everyone installs Doom on everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, listen, if I could change the, I mean, at Tom's Hardware, we're all about, and I'm all about, do things because you can. Don't just do things because you have an immediate use for them. Push the envelope. I mean, that's why we love overclockers who are like using liquid nitrogen to push their CPU to 7 gigahertz. It's not like you're going to sit there typing on Microsoft Word, pouring liquid nitrogen on the CPU with one hand and typing with the other. You do stuff because you want to push the envelope, and it's cool. So I'm curious, Caroline, Ash, would you see a use for running Windows 10 on your Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, if I had an 8 gig, yeah, definitely.
Or at least for bragging rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's great to be able to use. I have to say that since I've been using Pi a lot more, my desire to run Windows on it is less. I mean, like, I want to do it to do it. But as far as like actually when I'm using it, I find that there's so much great software out there for Raspberry Pi OS, and I've gotten so used to the UI and working in Raspberry Pi OS and Linux that, like, I feel like there's very few programs that I'm missing. And what I'm missing most of all, I think, is native support for certain things in the browser that is killing me. But we have solutions for that. Like playing Netflix in the browser is, as I think many of you know, is not natively supported because of the DRM. The what is it called? Livevine. Am I saying that right? Livevine DRM is not built into, I think, Chromium for Linux, but there's a great workaround that someone came up with. Forgetting the name of the person who did it, but I have an article about it on Tom's Hardware, and all you got to do is install like a specially compiled version of Chromium, and then you can, get really nice smooth YouTube playback, which you don't by default, and you can do Netflix and other DRM services, like I think Disney Plus Prime didn't work for me, but I think Widevine. I knew I had the name wrong. Thank you, Dave. And when we had Evan Upton on last week, that was one of the things he said should really be supported in Raspberry Pi. Speaking of Windows on Raspberry Pi, I find it interesting. One of the things that we've had the opportunity to test, I'm curious, Caroline, if you've ever tried any of these, is some of the new Windows on ARM laptops that are out there that run, 4G, that have built-in 4G and possibly even 5G. What have you tried any of those?
I have not.
How about you, Ash? Have you tried any of them? Yeah. So
unfortunately, I haven't.
I will tell you that I've been so far, and so for those not familiar, Qualcomm has been pushing what I think they call always connected PCs for a few years in the Windows space, and they are laptops which run Windows 10, but they have Qualcomm ARM processors in them, and they're now on like the third generation of it. And these laptops, so there is a Windows on ARM, and I think that's the basis, but Microsoft doesn't make it readily easily available, and doesn't make it readily easily available for Raspberry Pi. But they could, because they're doing it already for these Qualcomm powered laptops. Now, my experience with them has not been good. I mean, it's good if it were a Raspberry Pi that's $35 to $75. It's not good if it's a $1,400 or $1,000 notebook and it can't run 64-bit Windows apps, and it can't run, and the number of native ARM apps for it for Windows is very small. So, however, if you see the progress that's being made because of these Qualcomm powered notebooks, I think that could bleed into support for Raspberry Pi, because it's making Windows on ARM. And yes, Amir says Microsoft's working on x64 emulation. Yeah, they're working on it. But even with the 32-bit emulation that they do, it's emulation, which, I guess is fine if you were spending, getting a computer that's $35. If you're buying a laptop that's $1,000, as these are, and then anyway, I'll get off my soapbox about that. But I think the potential is there to see us for real. I'm also really curious, Les, how you think running Windows 10 natively compares to running emulation with something like Wine.
I would say it's a better experience overall. Wine is fantastic. I've been using Wine for over a decade, including gaming as well. And it works reasonably well for me. But running Windows 10 on ARM on a Raspberry Pi has been seamless. I've just used the standard exe files, downloaded them, installed them, and it has run with no messing around. It just works. With Wine, it does work if I configure it and tweak it, and I do that. But it's not as easy as just downloading the file and double-clicking, and away you go.
Cool. So something else we were going to talk about. Ash has a really interesting Pi product that she's reviewing. One thing that we really want to do on this show is be bringing on some of the latest and coolest Pi products for folks. I also want to just remind everyone who's watching live. Obviously, people are watching not live, and they're watching and they're listening, which is great. That we have live chat on here, and if anyone has a question or comment, we'll address it live. So Ash, you have something pretty cool to show us that you've been reviewing. What is it?
It is really cool. I've got the Pi Top 4 to check out. I'm holding the box up because it's a little bit easier to see than the actual device itself, which I have here to the side. So if you're not familiar with the Pi Top 4, it's obviously not the first edition of the Pi Top. It is the fourth. And it is it's a small Raspberry Pi machine. It has a Raspberry Pi 4 inside. And it comes with a custom case. It's got a fan inside to help keep it cool, which you need to keep the Raspberry Pi 4 cool. If you're not familiar with the Pi 4, they run kind of hot sometimes. But it also has a built-in speaker, an LCD screen. You've got some buttons down on the sides. But it's mainly geared towards beginners. So if you're a teacher, if you volunteer in any kind of like a classroom or learning environment, this is a really good introduction to the Raspberry Pi. All of the ports have been made easily accessible on the side. You've got this little bottom piece that snaps in that has labeled ports that you can use to add custom modules, which they're kind enough to supply in their founder's kit, which is a neat little metal box that's got a wide variety of LEDs, sensors, potentiometers, buttons, you name it. It's got all kinds of cool stuff to build projects with. And if you go onto the Pi Top website, they actually have tons of instructions and projects that you can use to familiarize yourself with just programming on the Raspberry Pi. If you're not used to using Python, they'll show you what you need to do to start writing your first Python script. And to do a little live demonstration, I have a little project hooked up here using the ultrasonic sensor. And if you're listening and can't see, it looks like two little round eyes that look at you. That's not really eyes. They're just little parts of the sensor.
Yeah, it looks like I think the front of either Wall-E or Johnny Number 5.
Yeah, there you go. So it's connected to the Pi Top, and I also have some LEDs. And the closer my hand is to the sensor, the LEDs will change from green to yellow to red when it's too close. So if I move my hand closer, you see the light turns yellow, and closer, it turns red. And so you can use that for all kinds of projects. My original idea was actually to make a theremin. I wanted it to make a high-pitched whine the closer my hand got to the sensor, but still working on a few technical details on that. But that's the Pi Top 4. It's really cool. If you want to learn how to use a Raspberry Pi, or if you got a little one you want to introduce them to, check this thing out. It has everything you need to get started. The case, the power adapter, everything. It's awesome.
So where does one get one, and how much does it cost?
You can find them on the Pi Top website. That's pi-top.com. And they currently run, I want to say let me verify that price to be sure. But the Pi Top 4 module is the latest edition. And that one looks like it's running for, I don't have the price pulled up immediately. I'm sorry.
Yes. So one thing that's interesting is you say that you're programming it in Python, correct?
Yes, it does use Python.
So I'm curious to kind of pull the real Python or blocks.
I was actually using Python. They have a text editor called Mu, I believe, MU, and it's pulling from a custom library that they have for their sensor pods. But it is actually Python script. It's not Scratch. It's actually Python script that I was using.
I'm curious, Caroline. What language do you primarily use, and what do you kind of recommend to beginners for people getting started with Pi? Primarily Python, or do you like to see kids start with Scratch or something like that? You're muted, I think.
It depends on their age group. So I have done a couple STEM workshops in the past. And if you're looking at like middle school down, you are looking at the visual, what do you call it again? I'm sorry, the visual one?
Scratch.
Scratch. You are looking at Scratch for that. And then I would say, I guess middle school to high school. Yeah, definitely. Python, I would highly recommend learning Python. And I mean, a lot of college kids, that's a lot of kids going into engineering school, college, they come in knowing Python already, and they are ahead of the game. So they definitely need to know that as a stepping point to, JavaScript, to the other languages. I also want to mention, I did look up the price of the PyTop, and it kind of took my breath away. $299. I was like, whoa. Like, you bought it, it's a lot of accessories for, for that computer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important if you're getting a kit to get started with Pi for someone. I think you got to get a kit that does physical computing with lights and sensors and motors. You don't get if you really want to learn and enjoy Raspberry Pi, you got to use the GPIO pens, and you got to teach kids to use the GPIO pens. To me, that's the fun of it. Otherwise, it's an inexpensive Linux computer, which is neat. But with Pi, you can do something that you can't do with you can't readily do with a Windows PC at all, which is all the things that you plug into the GPIO pins. So if you're trying to really enjoy it and get the most out of it, you have to get things to plug into those GPIO pins.
I want to point out, if I could, Avon.
Yeah.
At the top of the Pi 4, it has all of the GPIO pins totally accessible, and they're labeled, so you can see what you're connecting everything to. So I didn't want to imply that that's covered up. That is included in this.
That's very important.
Important to note.
That's very important. And Les, we just today put up a review of a new case that you tested. You don't happen to have it sitting near you, do you?
Unfortunately not, no. I've cleared my desk for the first time in years.
But it's the Silverstone Pi 02 case, which gives you really good passive cooling, but it doesn't let you put a hat on it. You have access to GPIO, but you can't put a hat because you need to use an extender cable. And for me, I've got a whole bunch of Raspberry Pi cases waiting for me to do a roundup of. And one thing that really there it is. So for those listening, Les is holding up the black aluminum Silverstone Pi 02 case, which goes for, I believe, $25. Although right now, I think in the US, it's not, you'll have a hard time finding one, but it will be around. And it does a good job of passive cooling. But, to get to the Raspberry Pi, to get to those GPIO pins, you're going to need to use a cable. So I don't know. For me, you got to have the GPIO pins, and you got to have Python. What do you think, Les? Do you think Python is a good first language for kids to learn?
Definitely. It's human readable, it's understandable, so kids can just get on with doing some great work. I mean, there's a library called GPIO 0 in Python, which enables anyone to do any electronics with Raspberry Pi simply. It abstracts the language away so that they know to make an LED blink. They just type in led.blink and then say how long it's on for, how long it's off for. And it just works. It simplifies it down to just getting the job done. And if the kids can be interested with that, they can move on to, proper Python. I'm using air quotes now, ironically. And then they can understand a bit more Python and learn with that. I mean, GPIO 0 is fantastic. It's become the standard at Raspberry Pi Foundation for teaching electronics and Python.
Yeah, Yep,
And we'll look as well.
my son and I have used it. Ash, what was your first first language that you used in your first programming experience with Raspberry Pi?
Oh, it was Python with the Raspberry Pi. Python. I was making a smart alarm clock, and I used it to mess with an LCD screen like the one you pulled up earlier, Caroline. It was one of those, and yeah, I made a smart alarm clock with one of those in Python.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, I will say this. My son is 8, and I have him now do everything in regular. I try to get him not to use Scratch at all and just use regular Python. He did use Scratch for a while, and I have, it used to be when he was younger, I would get in a lot of robot kits to review, and most of them were not. None of them was really Raspberry Pi. They were all proprietary. And it was all like, okay, you can use our block-based coding language. Most of them didn't even use regular Scratch. They were all block-based. But once you've learned that, you can't take that knowledge and bring it anywhere. I mean, I guess you can take the concept, but you can't take that specific knowledge and bring it anywhere. Now, I really try to get him, because now he's in 2nd grade and he can read and write really well. Like, hey, write, type code. Don't use the block language, because like this is what you're going to be able to take with you, knowledge you're going to be able to take with you to other places. So he's doing Python now. It's weird. He and I'll have a conversation about syntax. Like he plays this game called Roblox, which is a very popular game with kids, and you program that game in Lua, which is another text-based language. And he'll tell me how he likes the syntax in Lua better than Python, because it doesn't have to do all the indenting or whatever. But it's I think it's really important. One of the things that's really cool about Raspberry Pi is it's a standard. It's a standard, and it uses standard things like Python and Linux. So you can take something like the PyTop and learn from it, and then take that knowledge and use it for other tools with the Pi, for other systems, all kinds of things.
Can I bring up something else you're going to learn with the Pi that you can take somewhere else?
Yeah, of course.
Terminal commands.
Oh yeah.
You got to get good on terminal commands. Okay, all these kids who grew up on Windows and think their whole life is drag and drop.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I will give a shout out to the folks who make the Kano computer. I don't know if anyone has ever tried that. The latest version, I think, is an x86, but the prior versions were all based on Raspberry Pi 3, and you put this Kano computer together yourself, and the software on it, which I think was probably built on top of Raspberry Pi OS, but they had their own UI on it, and they have all these cool games in it that teach you about Linux, and they have one called, I think it's called Terminal Quest, and it's like Zork. It's like a text game, but it teaches you terminal commands. And so my son was playing it just the other day. He just decided to take it out and was playing it, and he was like, if you type CD and you don't put anything after it, you go up a directory. Did you know that? He's learning his terminal. It is important. And in fact, when he's exposed to it in the command prompt in Windows, he's like, oh wait, shouldn't I have to type ls, to list things? So it's interesting. I just always say, don't, never underestimate what your kids can learn at any age. My daughter is a year and a half now, so she's not quite there with Python yet, but maybe give her 6 months, because I see her grabbing the mouse and just trying to scroll with it all the time, or getting up and trying to type on the keyboard all the time. So anyway, we're getting near the end of our show, but I wanted to just to ask everybody real quick, what project are they working on are they working on what Pi projects are they working on right now? Caroline, how about you?
I got a few going on right now. Today on my channel, the Caroline Dunn channel, I released a bonsai watering project today. And so that I was alluding to that earlier about, getting that solar panel battery out there. And yeah, basically I hooked up a Raspberry Pi to an Arduino to a pump, and it checks it's every 5 minutes, it checks the water moisture level of the soil. And then it waters my bonsai tree all day long because it's really hot outside.
Yeah, that's a great project. How about you, Ash?
I'm still determined to get this Pi Top project with the ultrasonic sensor working as a theremin. If I can get sound to work, I want to make my Raspberry Pi sing.
Oh, that's great. Les, how about you?
My current project is a little something different. I've got a lovely case in two-tone with a lovely metallic pink.
So the case he's showing you here is it's metallic purple or pink?
Metallic purpley pink. Yeah, I'm not too sure which one it is, but I like it anyway.
It's beautiful.
And I've got a length of electroluminescent wire, which I'm going to hook up to the GPIO somehow. You need a little board to make it work. And I may be doing something cyberpunky with this. Maybe.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Well, I have a couple of things on my plate. One is more long term. I got to get the stuff, which is I want to have for behind me. And normally I'm not in this location. I'm in the location where there's for those viewing the show where there's like a blank wall behind me. I want to create an LED matrix that shows some kind of data visualization while I'm on the show to make it cool. But I have to get all the stuff for that. My son and I will probably, since it just came in the mail this weekend, build a MeArm Pi. We bought the MeArm kit, which is a robotic arm that is programmable through Pi. But we'll want to take it a little further than what you normally do, which is the normal kit just lets you move around with joysticks, which is great. But he's talked about, is there any way we could attach a camera and do some kind of image recognition with it to make it more interesting? We also have hanging out our most recent project, which was a Pimoroni STS Pi robot, which is basically a robot car with camera, and we want to try and find a way to have it do facial recognition or image recognition if that's possible. So physically put together, but we'd like to do something neat with the software. If anybody has any ideas of how to get that rolling, I'm all screens. Anyway, I just wanted to thank our special guest, Caroline Dunn, whose YouTube channel you can find by going to youtube.com/Caroline. Is that right? Lots of great stuff there. Our resident Raspberry Pi experts, Ash and Les, and we will see you next Tuesday at 2:30 Eastern, 7:30 BST, or archived wherever your favorite podcasts are on YouTube and on Facebook. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.